Tim and Jim are two young footballers from Laos in Southeast Asia. One day, Tim filmed Jim showing off his skills and the video went viral. Naturally, Manchester United scouts saw the video and decided Jim was the new Ronaldo and signed him on the spot. Little did they know, Tim was just as good, but they left him behind to play for their local club, Ezra FC. I'm actually wearing their kit right now, but more on that later on. Both players have the maximum potential ability of 200 out of 200 and very similar current abilities. Their individual attributes are slightly different, as they were randomized by the game when the database was set up. But comparing the two of them, you can see they are very similar players. So at the end of Season 1, Tim has 9 goals in 12 games and has slightly increased his current ability. The Laos Premier League is played from February through to October, so they're actually only halfway through the season and only in second place. Jim, on the other hand, has somehow played 85 games for United's youth teams, scoring 50 goals in the process. Obviously, that game time is going to massively improve him as a player, and as a result, he takes an early lead in the battle between the two brothers. However, Tim does have the edge physically, which may be a byproduct of not playing youth football and playing senior first-team football instead. Jim scores 64 goals in 64 starts for the United youth teams in Season 2, which has massively upped his current ability to be a good player for a top championship club or lower Premier League team. Surely he'll go out on loan next season, where he might play against his brother. Tim is still at Ezra, scoring 9 goals in 13 starts so far this season, but he will be heading to England to join Stoke City in the Championship for an initial fee of £3,000. I love the idea that Stoke have got a scout out in Laos looking for the next Lionel Messi, although that kind of is what Ezra are trying to do in real life. They actually look to bring in young talented kids, and some of which come from some really tough backgrounds, into their youth academy. There they develop as footballers, but also build skills they can take into their later life. And it clearly works, because nearly half the players in the Laos national team either play for Ezra FC or have played for the club at some point in their career. Now you're probably wondering how on earth I actually got their shirt. I was sent the shirt by Sangalo, who specialise in working with clubs in far-flung leagues around the world to sell their jerseys in markets they wouldn't ordinarily be able to reach. So when you buy their jerseys from Sangalo, you're helping create an extra income stream for them to help run the club. Sangalo actually have a sale on right now ahead of the holidays, and discounts are applied automatically at checkout, so you can get a great bargain on a great Christmas present. So go visit them and see what shirts and clubs catch your eye via the link in the top line of the description. Now Stoke have clearly signed Tim for the future. In Season 3 he's only started 1 game in the Championship and hasn't scored, but he does have a respectable return from the youth team. Training at better facilities has helped develop his current ability, but he's nowhere near the level of his brother, who actually spent the season on loan in the Championship at Luton Town, scoring 17 goals in 45 games. Although with a current ability of 154, he should definitely be playing in the Premier League. Sadly, both Stoke and Luton lost in the Championship playoff finals. They actually both got on the pitch in the second meeting between the two sides this season, but not at the same time. Jim came off at half-time and Tim came on in the 80th minute. In Season 4, Jim is back at United, this time in and around the first team, scoring an impressive 9 Premier League goals. Tim, on the other hand, has had a season of stagnation, only making 1 appearance off the bench for Stoke. He did suffer a 2-month injury, but that doesn't explain his lack of game time. His current ability is good enough to play in the Championship, but clearly not good enough for a Stoke team who want to make a promotion push. It would have been good to see him loaned out, but I guess Stoke see him as a very important backup player. So important he makes 1 sub-appearance this season. The lack of game time has meant that Jim is miles ahead of his brother in terms of footballing ability. However, they are both 20 years old and have still got a long way to go in terms of their development. Season 5 is a breakout season for Jim, as he only misses 2 games for Man United this season, scoring 14 times. If he doesn't hit 200 out of 200 current ability, I will be shocked. However, it's the total opposite for Tim, who barely features in a Stoke side who have been dropping down the Championship table. I'm starting to think he won't reach his potential ability unless he gets to move away to a club who actually value him. It's not like he's not good enough. He has the 5th highest current ability in the Stoke City side. But luckily, a few months into Season 6, Stoke get a new manager who actually values Tim, making him the first choice striker in a struggling Stoke City side who finished 19th in the table, scoring 12 goals in the process. Jim, on the other hand, is running riot at Manchester United, scoring 17 goals to put him 4th in the league scoring charts. He's also now the 3rd best player in the database by current ability, and by contrast, Tim is 873rd best, which actually is very high. So it's no surprise when he scores 19 goals in 45 games to take Stoke City up to the Premier League via automatic promotion, whilst also being the league's top goal scorer. Finally, big clubs are taking notice of him. Who is going to win the race to sign him? Jim has scored 19 goals this season and was 2 away from being the league's outright top scorer, as Manchester United finish in 5th place for the 4th season in a row. However, he's won his first piece of major silverware, winning the League Cup final against Chelsea, as well as scoring the winner in the Europa League final to defeat Newcastle. But next season, we may well see them both compete for the Premier League Golden Boot, as Tim has moved to Aston Villa for £42 million. He scores 13 times in the league and 13 times in the Conference League, as the Villains go on to beat Antwerp in the final, with Tim securing his first piece of major silverware. However, Villa only finish in 12th place in the league, whereas United rise to 3rd, but Jim's goal tally was reduced to 17, the joint 4th most in the league. He also looks to have stopped developing, as his current ability hasn't risen above 190. On the other hand, Tim does still seem to be improving, and he is slowly but surely closing the gap to his brother, which gets smaller in Season 9 as Tim scored 20 goals, 2 more than his brother, although he couldn't help them get past the Europa League quarter-finals. So this brings us to Season 10, where Tim and Jim are neck and neck in terms of current ability as the 2nd and 3rd best players in the database. I think you can argue that Tim has actually become the better striker, as he's better in the air and slightly more physical. I guess playing senior football at Ezra FC at such a young age really did help him progress later on in his career. But I'm really surprised that neither of them have reached their potential ability of 200. I maxed out some of their hidden attributes like consistency and professionalism, which they need to have in order to reach the highest level of potential ability. But for whatever reason, it just hasn't happened. You'll also notice Tim has made the move to Tottenham for £105 million, where he instantly becomes the Premier League's top scorer, leaving his brother in the dust, who only scored 18. I hate to say it, but if Jim scored the same amount of goals as Tim, Manchester United should have won the Premier League title. So in 10 years, our 2 Wonderkids have gone from Laos to top Premier League clubs. But what about their performances for Laos? Well, way back at the start of the video, Laos were ranked 187th in world rankings. A decade later, they're only 162nd. For some reason, they just don't seem to get many call-ups. Jim has played on average 4 times a season for Laos, whereas Tim is lucky if he gets 2 caps a season. It may be because their clubs don't want them playing international football for such a low-ranked nation where they could risk some serious injuries. However, I'm pretty sure the mechanic is that clubs can only request to ask the national team to limit the number of minutes their players are playing for the international team and not stop them going altogether. So it may just well be the case that neither of these two are very keen on playing for their international team. Also, I am recording this video on one of the most bizarre days of my life. The BBC have run an article about me that featured on their homepage, and there was also a segment about me on the local BBC News TV show. I've actually just had to pause recording because I got a call from another news agency asking to run a story about me being a full-time YouTuber, which in itself is absolutely bonkers, let alone that being newsworthy. So I just wanted to say a quick thank you to you lot. It's not lost on me how fortunate I am to be in this position, and I wouldn't be here for you guys watching my content, liking the videos, subscribing to the channel. So I want to say thank you because you are making me live the dream. If I could, I'd buy you all a drink to say thank you, but given that a pint is about £4, I'd be down about £500,000 or so. So this thank you will have to suffice for now. In Season 11, Tim scored 6 more goals than Jim, with Spurs finishing above United in the Premier League. Jim scored in the FA Cup final, but it was Tim's team that ended up winning the game, as well as the League Cup final. So that now means Tim has overtaken Jim with 3 trophies won, and that has been solidified in season 12 as Spurs lift the Premier League title, with Tim scoring 9 more goals than Jim. To add insult to injury, Jim and United lost the Champions League final to Manchester City. Now Haaland has retired, they are the 2 best players in the game and have actually developed slightly. As players get older, they stop developing their technical and physical attributes. However, their mental attributes will still increase as they get older, and I'm pretty sure that's exactly what's happened here with that rise in current ability. So what can they do at the peak of their careers? Well, the brothers top the Premier League scoring charts, but it's Tim and Tottenham who go on to win the title 4 points ahead of United, before Man City blow them both completely out of the water the following season. But Tim retains his top goal scoring award and goes on to win the League Cup for a second time. But in season 15, Jim finally leads Manchester United to their first title since 2013, picking up the Golden Boot in the process. Sadly, they do lose another Champions League final though. They also lost the FA Cup final to Spurs, with Tim scoring one of the 3 goals. However, at 32, Tim is starting to decline, as he drops below 190 current ability. He did still manage to beat his brother in the Premier League, but his goal tally is starting to drop off, only scoring 18 times this season. But that's only because he was focused on other things. He helped the side win the FA Cup against Chelsea and helped Spurs to their first Champions League title with an assist in the final, which is a little bit more impressive than the League Cup that Jim and United won this season. But in season 17 in 2040, the slowdown is really starting to happen. It's the first time in ages neither of them have reached 20 goals, and Tim isn't even Tottenham's highest goal scorer. But those goals did help Spurs lift the Premier League title by a single point over Manchester United. And get ready for something that you never thought you would ever hear, ever. Spurs have won the treble, as they beat Man City in the FA Cup final with Tim scoring a goal, and in the most poetic way possible, both kids from Laos scored in the Champions League final, but it was Tim who lifted the trophy at the end of the night. Jim had to walk away from a 3rd Champions League final loss. I love the fact they met in the Champions League final. It just seems so perfect. In 2041, they both win trophies. Tim with Spurs wins the League Cup, and Jim scored a goal in the FA Cup final in a win over Everton. Despite both being their club's leading goal scorers this season, neither could keep pace with Manchester City. They do meet again in the Champions League semi-finals, with Tottenham having the advantage, but they lose to Barcelona in the final in extra time, being moments away from being a 3-time consecutive winner of the Champions League. But clearly, Tim felt this was a good time to hang up his boots after a 19-year-long career. Jim actually kept going for another 2 seasons, but his goal-scoring tally shows he was in decline. The numbers on screen are purely league stats, so I've done the calculations for all competitions. And in all competition at first team level, Jim took part in 1,005 matches, scoring 475 goals, almost a goal every other game, with his most productive season being the 2037-38 season, where he scored 40 goals in 62 games. Tim, on the other hand, only featured in 782 games, mostly because Stoke never played him. But add-ons from later bonuses and transfers meant the initial £3,000 grew to £1.4 million for Ezra FC. In that time, he scored 439 goals, meaning he had a way higher goals to game ratio than his brother Jim, with 2035-36 being his most productive season, scoring 42 goals in 55 appearances. So based on those stats, as well as his far superior trophy haul, despite having a far less advantageous start point, I think Tim has had the better of the 2 careers. But the real decider will be who won the most Ballon d'Ors. Well, neither of them actually went on to win a single Ballon d'Or. I mean, how on earth is that even possible? I am fuming.